Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Fostering Success Michigan Life Domains webinar series. My name is Maddie Day, and I am the Director of Outreach and Training with the Center for Fostering Success at Western Michigan University. And in my role, I directly oversee the Fostering Success Michigan statewide initiative. Before we jump into the webinar today, I just want to remind everybody a few housekeeping items. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. You can ask questions or use the chat feature in your sidebar. We will be taking questions throughout the broadcast, and then there will be time at the end of the webinar for you to ask your questions and for us to field some answers. If you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact the Citrix team at the number you see on your screen. And the recording of this webinar will be available on our resource library at fosteringsuccessmichigan.com. I would like to say a special thank you to our funders, the Kresge Foundation, the Havermill Foundation, and Western Michigan University for their continued support of Fostering Success Michigan and the Fostering Success Michigan Network. Today we have our special guest, Ken Marks. Hi, Ken.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Ken, before we get started, if you could just tell everybody a little bit about your role and what you do, that would kind of help us get started.
Okay. My role, I'm the housing resource specialist and also the contract administrator for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I really have a focus on working with young people and helping them to succeed with their housing needs as well as supportive services.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. So as Ken alluded to, today we are going to be discussing the housing life domain. This webinar is great for youth, students, professionals, and supportive adults, as housing is one of those basic needs that really intersects with pretty much everybody who is involved and engaged with supporting young adults with experience in foster care as they make their way to and through the education to career pipeline. We are going to go over the 7 life domains, just providing a very high-level overview, and then kind of take a deep dive into the housing domain and explain why this domain is important and what impact it has on our on education success for our young adults with experience in foster care. We will highlight the work happening in our network, and in particular some of Ken's expertise, and then provide some resources related to the housing domain. And don't forget, for any questions that you might have, or any comments that you might have, please feel free to use the chat feature in your sidebar. So let's dive in. As many of you know, the 7 life domains is a framework that the Center for Fostering Success has adapted to, that is from Casey Family Programs. It's my life framework, and the Center for Fostering Success has adapted to include and orient these 7 life domains with education at the center. The 7 life domains framework often offers a way for professionals and supportive adults to help young adults with experience in foster care organize and understand and develop a response to the complexity of their lived experience. The housing domain is one of the probably most complex yet essential domains to education success. For young adults with experience in foster care, many of them find themselves facing a transition when they exit foster care that feels and can often be very abrupt. Often young adults go from being dependent on a state system and having a life that is primarily case managed to being fully independent with the expectation that they will manage their own life, including finances, employment, housing, education, and it's for some, they may also be managing the lives of the dependents, other children that they have with them. Unfortunately, many of our young adults have little or no support in helping to find suitable housing. And I just want to pause here and just say that when we talk about suitable housing, we're really talking about safe, secure, affordable, and stable housing. So housing that goes beyond couch surfing, housing that goes beyond sort of staying a few nights here, a few nights there with friends, family, or kinship. And we're really talking about housing that allows a young person to, with stability, engage in their education and employment. Unfortunately, some of the outcomes that we see are not so positive for our young adults with experience in foster care. Young adults who age out of foster care are twice as likely to be unable to pay for rent. They experience up to 4 times the likelihood that they will be evicted from their residence. And 25 to 30% of these individuals who will age out of foster care will experience homelessness after they leave foster care. Many of these young adults experience foster care within the first 30 days of exiting foster care, or will experience homelessness within the first 30 days of exiting foster care. So again, when we talk about the housing domain, we're talking about securing safe, affordable, and stable housing. We recognize that this is a challenge, and here's just a list of reasons that we have identified, both from our students that have worked with us and our supportive adults and professionals across our network. We found that many individuals may not have a family safety net or an extended supportive adult safety net. Individuals may not have anyone to sign a lease. And individuals may not have had the opportunity to learn about rental deposits, utility bills, and rental insurance. Most recently, one of the comments that was made at our Fostering Success Michigan Community Collaborative last week at Eastern Michigan University was that with all of the paperwork that young adults are expected to navigate and sign and understand, often rental agreements and the expectations that are written into them don't make a whole lot of sense to young people. They often don't have supportive adults to help them understand the documentation that they are signing, and they may not have full understanding of the expectations that they're signing into. So just a couple more kind of definitions. So when we talk about the housing domain, and in particular when we talk about homelessness, we might often hear young people who have experienced foster care talking about living with friends or family. And this term is really considered a term of homelessness considered doubled up. Without a stable home, many young people often may end up couch surfing or staying with various friends at a time. Both of these definitions of doubled up and couch surfing are part of the homelessness definition, and part of what we use to identify young adults who are at risk for not having safe and stable housing. Ken, I would love to hear from you, kind of maybe some examples of what it might look like for a young person who is doubled up or couch surfing.
Well, oftentimes when they're doubled up on couch surfing, it's really a short-term mechanism for them, in that oftentimes they may be moved in or doubled up with a family or someone, a friend, or could be a relative, and after a while it kind of runs its course, and you start getting some different vibes, especially a young person, getting some vibes like, okay, it's time for you to go. Without saying that it's time for you to go. So you kind of start getting a little bit cold shoulder. And so you have to start to think about, where do I want to go? Because number one, the young person doesn't want to be in that position. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that happen to them. And being that most of the foster youth have no one to really turn to. So they're, for the most part, on their own and trying to figure out, what do I do next?
Yeah, and I think, this instability that we see young people experience when they're doubled up or they're couch surfing, it really interferes with their ability to attend school regularly, to engage in healthy peer relationships, and to engage in, healthy employment behaviors as well. Thank you so much for those descriptions, because I think that kind of helps provide some more of the personal context to what young people may be feeling in those situations. So a couple last things before we get to sort of diving in further with Ken. We just want to highlight how the housing domain sort of impacts young people's post-secondary experience. Some of the things that we see, and there's many programs that are working to address this, but I think it's unfortunately not something that we can say is policy as much as it's a best practice. But some of the challenges that we see around housing in the post-secondary education arena really are that students with experience in foster care are likely to experience homelessness during breaks from school. Many schools have breaks over Thanksgiving. They have breaks over the winter holiday, and then of course there are summer breaks, and all of these times are breaks where housing may be closed, or the housing that's available may also have some limitations as far as the food services that are available with them. There are some schools that have worked to address this, and they work to provide housing during breaks. However, this is not a standard policy, and for many of those institutions that do provide housing over breaks, that comes as an extra cost for students that choose to elect into those. So by accessing that on-campus break housing, there's an additional financial burden that they may or may not be aware of needing to pay for. When it comes to community colleges, we see that many community colleges do not offer housing options. Fortunately, this is an area that's improving and changing. We see many of our Michigan community colleges working toward establishing campus housing, working toward establishing partnership agreements with nearby four-year institutions that may also have campus housing that can be leveraged to support the nearby community colleges. And then we also see that for both community colleges and students at a four-year institution, finding affordable housing in proximity to work and school can pose a significant challenge, particularly for schools that are in urban areas, densely populated areas. The challenge of finding affordable housing that is close and has close access to campus, either via a bus route or just a close enough drive, can be very challenging for young people. And then that produces challenges that young people face when they are trying to stay engaged in support systems on a college campus. So it's for all of these reasons that Fostering Success Michigan puts such an emphasis on the housing domain and really seeks to provide resources and address some of these challenges both institutionally and systemically that young people with experience in foster care face as they move into the higher education setting. So with that, I am going to have Ken join us and really kind of focus the next 6 questions here on asking the experts. So Ken, you are our expert today. Thank you again so much for joining us. I would love to hear more about the work that you do and some of the projects and programs that you're aware of that support housing for young people with experience in foster care.
Okay. I should just first start out to say that, I had a plan initially when I first started here, and I looked at the words in terms of what the direction of the Department of Health and Human Services was focused on, and it was focused on to create that model of permanent and supportive housing. And I see permanence as a continuum of care and services as it relates to housing, not to stay at the level that you're at when you first start out. For example, my idea has always been from homelessness to hope. And so when you look at that, we have a number of contracted agencies because young people have to learn how to do certain things. And I realize exiting and their experiences through foster care have them in a position of where they want to hurry up and get out and get their own place and get settled. My objective is to do the same thing, but I also want it to be a stable living situation once you're done. So we have in Michigan, fortunately, a Michigan Network for Youth and Families, which is an organization, a nonprofit, that all of our homeless youth and runaway program providers are active members. And they bring ideas to the network in terms of how to best serve the young people, and also through the experience of working with homeless youth services. So those 22 contracted agencies provide the outreach services to locate a young person that's in need of housing, whether they're couch surfing. Then one of the services components in the homeless youth and runaway program is for them to be able to go out, reach out to their youth, and bring that youth into their program and provide the supportive services that's needed. If it's a situation where they were couch surfing and possibly got thrown out and they need an emergency shelter like to stay in for a few days, like 21 days, to get themselves together and figure out what's needed, they're not just there as a housing opportunity for that youth. They're there also to get the support that's needed to move them to the next level, which brings me to the other service component, which is the transitional living program. Within their transitional living program, if a youth were to go into that program and access their services and stay for a minimum of 9 months, they're eligible for the security deposit, first month's rent, and startup goods. In addition to that, we've partnered with with HUD and the Detroit Housing Commission to access housing choice vouchers. Through our partnership, a youth has the opportunity to live in a house or an apartment utilizing a housing choice voucher. That housing choice voucher is good for 5 years. So if they're going to school and they have a housing choice voucher, it makes it a lot easier for them because they no longer have to worry about where they're going to live. And we're looking to expand that to many other communities as we talk with HUD and other housing authorities to give them some insight as to the needs for young people in accessing housing. That all leads up to partnering with a number of community initiatives, the Michigan Network for Youth, Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, the Housing and Urban Development, and MISTA, to not only get a few vouchers, but get as many as we can access, because the more vouchers we get, the better opportunities a young person would have in order to be able to live in a stable, safe, affordable housing. Okay? So the providers that we currently have, they cover 63 counties. So someone would ask, well, how do the rural communities fit into this domain as well? Well, we have to utilize what's available to us. So through the continuum of care organizations in the counties and most of the rural communities as well, they are opened up for the housing area, and they can access housing through one of the continuum of care organizations and some of their vouchers and receive the supportive services through our homeless youth and runaway program. Which is a huge opportunity for them to not just live there, but gain some skills and utilize the other opportunities within the communities that they reside in. So just looking at the overall picture and how do you create that level of stability, a youth would go into a homeless youth program, live in that program for 9 months, have an opportunity to go live in an apartment themselves, and now they have 9 additional months, because it's a total of 18 months for the whole service through a HYR provider. So a young person would live for 9 months there, and then the other 9 months they could utilize of being in a place by themselves and demonstrating their ability to be successful on their own with the supportive services by the contracted agency. And being that it covers 63 counties, it opens up the door for the department to serve many youth. Okay? So it's a great opportunity for a young person to say, I'm going to college, I'd like to stay in this transitional living program, I'd like to get the 9 months. That's the continuum of service. And then after the 9 months, already be able to access up to 5 years through a housing choice voucher. That provides an opportunity for the youth to attend college, get a job, and not have to worry about paying rent or anything, because the voucher covers the rent portion for them. So that to me is showing that there is a level of consistency and stability that a youth is gaining skills, and he or she has an opportunity to learn as they elevate themselves, from the homeless situation to hope. Or a youth who's exited foster care has an opportunity to say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to show what I've learned over the course of time, and I still have support, the support of agencies that can say, let me help you out. Just because you've completed 18 months don't mean that it just drops off. You still have the ability to go to that provider, whoever provided the services to you, and say, I have some questions for you, because they can still provide the outreach portion of services to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you so much for that overview. I think it's really helpful to hear how, you're working to, engage multiple agencies, from HUD to these other Michigan statewide networks, and really trying to offer this sort of array of support. And I think it is, thank you for sort of mentioning, kind of the challenges that are present, uniquely present for rural communities where they may not have access to the same level of resources, but to hear what you're doing in working with their continuum of care networks, I think provides at least some space of ideas for people to maybe go and kind of think about where they can work with their young adults to start accessing some housing services. I know we're going to get a little bit later into kind of some of the resources that you have recommended, but I would, before we kind of dive into that, I would love to hear from you how you really see housing as related to post-secondary access and success, and in particular for young adults with experience in foster care.
I actually see it in the ways that we create that stability. I think that for me, I have a plan, and it's a long-range plan. Well, I should say long-term plan for a young person to have housing within 7 years and have no mortgage at the end of the opportunity for them to have that housing. So if a youth were identified in a specific community, there are ways that the rent could be even affordable if they don't have a voucher. And it's a matter of developing within those communities an opportunity, because there are a number of homes that's sitting vacant. There are a number of the programs that's around that just has housing, the land bank that's sitting there, and those houses could be very easily developed for a young person to start out and have rent at $300 a month. In 6 years, they would have paid $21,600, and at the end of that, they would get a clear deed. Now that house is back on the tax rolls. It's given the youth an opportunity. They've completed school, they have a job, and now they own housing because they've been in foster care, and rightfully they deserve to have some stability in their lives. So my objective is to post-secondary to ensure that, okay, you're working and you're elevating yourself to another level in life, and so you want to create that stability where you are. So if you decide to live in the community that you're in, work in the community that you're in, you have all of those things at your disposal.
So, and it sounds like, I think what I hear you saying is when a young person, makes the commitment to pursue post-secondary education, that there's also resources available that for them to secure housing in that area that would really help to pave that way, that sort of housing stability way, so that they can continue in their education and then continue out into their career with stable housing, knowing that, that finding housing in your early career is, it's another challenge after, graduation and from college or receiving your 2-year degree or certificate. And so if you're able to start from the very beginning when you pursue your education to start working toward, making payments on this house, payments to own, or working toward, having this stable housing long term, that really sets a young person up for success.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And it also requires a number of partners to pull together, which is why, currently we partnered with the organizations who have the vouchers. We've partnered with those with the HUD, being that there's HUD available, there's dollars there to do improvements and to gain housing. So there's a number of different folks who are around right within the communities that can assist in pulling these things together for us so that a youth has permanent and supportive housing.
Awesome. Right. So I think that that kind of goes right into our next question, which is what is one thing attendees can do today to improve outcomes for young adults with experience in foster care in the housing domain?
Well, one of the things that they can do to improve their outcomes is that to recognize, number one, that there is a lot of learning that has to go into housing. There's a lot of things from the youth standpoint that they have to, obstacles that they're going to have to overcome in encouraging more landlords to be more acceptable to rent to a young person.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that understanding the rights, the landlord and tenant rights, because some of the things, challenges that a young person faces when you click on that link and go to the landlord-tenant responsibilities, well, you almost have to have a Juris Doctorate to understand it. So to
Right.
be able to break it down in its simplest form, to say these are your responsibilities as a tenant, and this is the landlord's responsibilities, so that when you get into a housing situation, you don't end up losing it because of a lack of knowledge and understanding of what your responsibilities are versus their responsibility. For example, if you come there and you if first as soon as you walk in the door and you're getting ready to lease this place, you want to make sure that it's decent, safe, and sanitary. There's no windows cracked, and you want to go and do a complete checklist so that
Mm-hmm.
you know that when I get ready to leave here, if there was a crack in the window, you're not going to charge me for that crack, or we're not going to have a dispute, over any of these issues because we're going to address it on the front end. That will improve the outcomes for a young person to be able to stay in the housing that they've been able to secure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, so your points about that there's housing is a really complex issue and there's lots of education and learning that goes into it. And so I appreciate you kind of saying that right off the bat, and that the part of the learning is just the advocacy that is needed, and the support and advocacy that is needed for a young adult as they are moving into that space of securing their own housing. And I think that, the things that you brought up as far as, if you are, a supportive adult professional, making yourself available to review the tenant agreement, talk with the landlord with the student, do a walkthrough with the student, make sure that the student is aware that they have rights. And I know that that issue of landlords sort of taking advantage of students was something that came up again last week at the Community Collaborative, and that's a really great opportunity for our professionals and supportive adults to partner with students and help them understand what rights they do have. And then also just letting landlords know, that the student is not alone, that this is not a student that you can take advantage of. So
Right.
thank you. It's, I think, really helpful and really tangible. Um, so the next thing that we have here is our list of resources from Ken, and we will make these links available on the FosteringSuccessMichigan.com website. We really encourage you to review these resources, to also share these resources with the young adults that you are working with. So can you provide us just kind of an overview of what people will find when they go to these two resources? So starting with the Foster Youth in Transition, Homeless Youth, Homeless and Runaway Youth Contractor List.
Yes. When you first access that the list for the homeless youth and runaway, there are 22 providers, and there's a link to each one of the individual providers in terms of what services and supports they provide to young people, the eligibility requirements, and kind of give you a good gauge of what you might be able to do while you're there in their programs. And I encourage anyone to contact them or go by and take a visit. To see what they're actually like. It's not like an opportunity where you're walking in the door and instantly, oh, here's a foster youth. And, the contracted agencies that contract with the Department of Health and Human Services are going through a lot of things that I thought was really needed from the contract standpoint. One of the things was I see youth as a transitioning from transition to success. And so when they access the Homeless Youth and Runaway program, a lot of the ideas and things were brought into by the youth population. I actually went to the NYOI Youth Board and asked them specifically questions that they had in terms of why they would not want to be in a homeless youth program, what are some of the challenges that they would face in looking at transitional living, and the idea for the contract was developed based on their ideas. I recognize that a young person does not want to be in a program for a long period of time, that they want to come in, get the skills necessary, and move on. So therefore, the contract that was developed by the Department of Health and Human Services for each one of those contractors specifically speaks to the language of this is what you will do for each youth that enter the program. You know, there are 9 program deliverables, or should I say 7 program deliverables, which is case management, counseling, recruiting, where they're actually going out in the community to spread the word about what services they provide, community education, meeting with all of the collaborative partners that they can get to assist the youth, be it in crisis intervention, working with them on independent living skills training. And I'm a firm believer in not just bookwork stuff. I like to see hands-on. For example, if you're in a homeless youth and runaway program, I'd like to see you, if you're interested in purchasing a car, I don't want you to read a book about it, and I don't want the staff there to tell you how to do it. You know, go to the actual source. If you see a car and you want to purchase that car, go to the individual that's selling the car. Talk to them about it with some direction from the homeless youth program providers to say, well, you know, you might need to check out insurance on it as well. You know, this is what you might want to have a mechanic with you take a look at the car. Those, to me, are experiences that you learn through going through that actual experience versus going to a book and the book is telling you, okay, here's what you do, and or going to a staff. I'm not a car salesman, so I could not tell you a whole lot about a car. I'm not an auto mechanic, so I couldn't tell you about it, you know, what may be wrong with this vehicle. So my objective is through the contract to state that. Give the young person an opportunity to go and find out for him or herself. You know, so that way they can come back and they can share that information with you as a provider. We don't have to have the answers to it all. We just have to have the vehicle to help us get the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that will be a hugely valuable resource that we can share on the FSM website. And I just want to say thank you and that just highlight that the contracts that you are created or have created, we're really informed by youth voice, and so we know that when we're able to include youth voice in our work, it gives us the better opportunity to actually create resources and supports for young adults that will actually meet their needs. So that's
right.
Awesome. The second resource that you have here is the Michigan DHHS referral. Could you tell us a little bit about what folks might find when they go there?
Okay, with the Detroit Housing Commission, we kind of embarked on a pilot project, and the pilot project was where a youth would be able to the youth provider, one of the HYF providers, could make a referral right here directly to me. I'm their link, and that referral would then be submitted to the Detroit Housing Commission for housing for the youth. Well, when we started out, the youth would be able to have housing for 18 months. Well, after we started working with it a little bit, we kept having more discussion on it and dialogue, and we were able to have an opportunity for a young person to access housing for 5 years. So currently, they would receive a housing choice voucher for 5 years. Here was the downfall and lessons that was learned. With the Housing Commission and HUD guidelines, if you make a referral and you receive the housing choice voucher, you only have 90 days to locate decent, safe, and sanitary housing. So I recognize that was going to be a problem, because if a person is homeless, it's going to be awful hard for them to actually look around for housing. So what we did is, when we find problems, the best way to deal with that problem is to start looking for other resources. Well, under my umbrella, I had access to the AmeriCorps Vista program as well. So I took the AmeriCorps Vistas and I found out that we had one AmeriCorps Vista who has a degree in finance as well as a real estate background. I was able to place that person right within the Detroit Housing Commission so that he would be able to assist the youth in locating housing and getting the inspection done so that that voucher does not go away. And so I think the objective is when making a referral, when you overcome different problems and you see problems that you've identified, to address it. Now, mind you that the Detroit Housing Commission, they don't know and understand the population of foster youth. They're not social workers. They are basically a housing center. So we have to open up our opportunities to share with them our needs and what we do, and they can share what they do. And so as we're finding barriers there, but the overall objective with this pilot is to be able to find the bugs that's in the problems, address it with one housing authority, and then after we get things worked out, then move to other housing authorities, which currently I have several other housing authorities who want to come in, like the Detroit Housing Commission, and want to provide housing choice vouchers. So I received 400 vouchers from the Detroit Housing Commission. Wow. So I'm looking to, if I could get 400 from Detroit and 400 from 7 or 8 other housing authorities, that would be a huge success for the youth accessing housing opportunities through a housing choice voucher.
So it sounds like this pilot project that you have with the Detroit Housing Commission has been fairly successful, which is exciting. And you know, I think, like you're saying, it does require a level of education, both on the needs of young adults with experience in foster care and some of the strengths and challenges that they might have in, you know, just sort of their search and securing housing, but also that, you know, there's been some leveraging of other partnerships that have been really integral in making this work. So that's, I think it's really exciting to hear about that pilot. And definitely, I would say, probably even more exciting to hear that it's been successful enough that you're looking to expand that.
Right. In addition to the referrals with MISTA and with HUD, there was also a demonstration project for innovative projects, and Detroit applied for one, and MISTA applied for one, and then there was one for Grand Traverse. Well, Grand Traverse was awarded the grant actually to provide a new innovative initiative for the urban communities. So because of our partnership and our continuum of care, the grant is like $1.3 million. So, and it came actually from HUD, so that allowed us an opportunity now to say it's specific to youth. We have a youth link right here, you know, and I'm the person with the youth homelessness initiative, so we were able to utilize our expertise in helping to shape what they do in the urban area based on the grant funds that they received.
That's awesome, and thank you so much for mentioning that, because I think I don't know that everybody has heard that exciting news. It is very exciting that Grand Traverse County was awarded that grant, and I know on the post-secondary side, our partners at Northwestern Michigan College are working very closely with the group that was awarded the HUD grant to help support students with experience in foster care who are attending or seeking to attend NMC, and really to help make sure that those young people, as well as the larger community of young people, are able to find that safe and stable housing to keep them on track for education and employment. So it's an exciting resource, and I think will be something that will provide lots of opportunity to educate all of us on how we can do this work, and really how we can leverage partners to sort of increase the success of this work.
Right.
So before we get to the last question, I just want to remind our audience members that we will be taking questions, and after this slide, we will have some time for question and answer. So if you haven't submitted a question yet, we encourage you to submit a question. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear about maybe some of the housing challenges that you're experiencing in your areas, understanding that every experience is unique and different. And of course, while we have Ken on the line, we absolutely want to make sure that we take advantage of his knowledge base and really can get some of your questions answered. So with that, Ken, again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. It's just been excellent to hear about the things that are going on and being led from you and your office. I know housing is a very complicated domain, like we keep saying, but it sounds like there's some really exciting initiatives coming out of your work. And so I would love to hear from you a humble brag. So it's one of the things that we do here at FSM is ask our partners to highlight some of their own successes or the things that they're excited about, maybe even just the reasons that kind of motivate you to get out of bed in the morning. So if you want to share a humble brag, we would love to hear it.
Well, I'm a firm believer. I've always been the type of an early riser, but some people get up early in the morning and they write music, they write songs or whatever, based on what they feel. I get up and I think of ideas and things that a homeless person might be going through, a homeless youth might be going through, and how do we provide the service? And so my life work has been working with people. So in working with foster youth, one of the things I woke up one morning and I thought about it, and I'm like, well, you know what happens when a youth go into the hospital and they were in foster care at some point and they have no place to go. They need the care, but they have no place to go. So I met with some people through the United Healthcare through my connections, and created a partnership with them so that when we run into those types of situations, we have someone that could help them with their housing, help them with jobs, help them getting rides, help them with nutrition and different types of things that, works with the whole youth. So I guess my big humble brag would be that I take information that I hear from a young person and I transpose that information to this is another area that we need to find a resource for.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's always great to hear how other professionals are sort of inspired in this work. And that's a great example of, just kind of taking that inspiration of, what about this issue? Something that, we probably don't think of until it's a crisis point, and then really being proactive to identify resources and support so that when that happens, and we know that it will, a young person doesn't have to feel alone. We don't have to necessarily scramble for resources. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. So now is our question and answer time, and I have some questions that we actually took earlier before the webinar from our both from our community collaborative and a meeting that I had earlier this month with the MYOI Midland Youth Board. So we'll start off with that, but again, just want to let folks know this is the time to ask questions. Looks like we have several minutes to do so, so just really want to encourage you, if you have any burning questions for Ken or about the housing domain, please feel free to send them in now. So the first question that we have, and this comes from the young adults at the Midland County MYOI Youth Board. They asked, can housing vouchers be used to pay housing at college dorms? And so it was, I thought it was a really good question, and maybe something, that would maybe prompt some good discussion. So what are your thoughts on that, Ken?
At this time, we don't have anything of that nature at this point. That is an area that, for a number of years I have been thinking about prior to, but again, it takes time to create those partnerships, because one of the things that I initially thought about was creating the level of a host family for college students who, when they're no longer able to be there at the dorm or during holidays, then they have a host family somewhere where they can go and they feel comfortable and knowing, okay, here's a number of host families in each county that we could, say we want to come and we want to spend whatever dates that is, and with some time frames and some parameters around it to say, Christmas holidays, no one wants to be alone on holiday.
Hmm.
So why not create that environment to where a person is also can be like a mentor to you and a host family.
Hmm. Thank you for that. And when the students or the young adults raised that question, I thought, gosh, that is a really good question, and maybe something even down the road that we can look toward as a possible, area for advocacy. But it's great to hear that in the interim, you've been looking at, what can we do as far as community resources for those young adults. The next question that we have comes from the FSM Community Collaborative that was co-hosted by Eastern Michigan University, focused on housing. And one of the issues that was raised by the students who were on the student panel actually was that there's currently policy that prevents students who are receiving Pell Grants from being eligible for subsidized housing. And the question was, is there any recourse or opportunity for young people who are receiving Pell Grants to be able to maybe challenge this, or are there any kind of other opportunities that we may not be aware of for them to access the subsidized housing?
Okay, because we have a direct pipeline with like with HUD and MISTA. I actually co-chairman of the board for MISTA, which provides me an opportunity to talk to people directly about the young people's needs.
Mm-hmm.
That's an area that we could explore, and there may be a way to have a variance over that, so we could actually access that. It's just a matter of going through the process to find an answer for you based on going to the right sources.
Yeah, well, and so that's exciting, and I just want to say thank you in advance for your willingness, to consider taking up that issue, because I know when I heard that, it was one of those things that I had to kind of pause on and think, well, the sort of the logic of that doesn't fully make sense. If
Hmm.
a young person is receiving Pell, it's because it's been recognized that they have, unmet need, and that they do not have the ability to fully fund their college education. And so, particularly for a young adult with experience in foster care, understanding that that unmet need is not able to be offset by a family member, and that of course part of that unmet need is not just going to be the tuition, but also the cost of attendance, which includes housing. And so I just think that was a really great question, and it's exciting to hear that
Yes.
there's some interest in looking at that.
Right. One of the things I noted is that it's easier for a person to get the educational dollars than it is for them to get housing. So that's something that
Mm-hmm.
I continue to drive with all of our community partners, that we have to find a way to, if you don't have a house to live in, or any housing situation, it's kind of difficult to deal with your education.
Right.
Because you're thinking, where are you going to sleep that night? And most young people have so much pride, most times they won't even ask.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And I think that's, one of the reasons that our campus support programs work so hard to address, this issue of housing, because they know that many times young people, they don't want to say I'm homeless, I'm couch surfing, I'm doubled up, I'm sleeping in my car, and yet
Right.
they know that if a student is not enrolled in education, and then their access to a campus coach who can support them with that issues goes away. And so it's sort of making the ends meet so that they can do both, not just choose housing or education.
Exactly.
So we had an excellent question that just came in from Karen, and Karen asks, are there housing vouchers available in Lansing, particularly for young adults with experience in foster care?
No, at this time there's not. They opened up a window of opportunity because it's kind of interesting. The Department of Health and Human Services, does not have an MOU, memorandum of understanding with the Lansing area yet.
Hmm.
Because of the pilot that we've had with Detroit, which covers multiple counties as well. It's not just specific to Detroit. But as we've learned more, we're starting to kind of branch out to other communities too. So I would say stay tuned for that one.
Awesome. And so thank you for that, and thank you to Karen for sending that question.
Hmm.
Looks like we have another question. So Karen followed up and said, we have a 4-year program in Lansing specifically for youth aging out of foster care through Hosanna House of Michigan. Um, so thank you so much, Karen, for sharing that resource. We will, Fostering Success Michigan will follow up with you to ensure that we have that on our website, and we make sure that we have that resource on our website, and potentially this would be a future opportunity for if there's opportunity out there for additional contracts or work with having these vouchers. Maybe Hosanna House would be one that would be an opportunity for them to support the vouchers in the Lansing community. Great, thank you. Let's see. The next question that I have is, has Michigan looked at making college dorms independent living settings? This is something that other states have done. California has done that, and there's a couple other states. I believe Texas is also has also worked to make some of the college dorms ILP or SILP settings. Is this something that you have looked at, Ken?
No, I haven't. I have not looked at that one as of yet. It sounds like it would be an interesting venture to look at, and I will put that down.
Yeah, I know I have talked with some colleagues in California and Texas, and it's been a really helpful way for young people to be able to continue their independent living support, but in a way that's really more kind of normalized for the typical college student. And so it sounds like a really exciting and kind of progressive way to look at providing this support, knowing that many colleges have the housing available for students, but if a student needs to continue the benefits of being in an ILP or SILP, they may not be able to utilize the benefits of the housing on campus.
Right, that's correct.
Great. So I think that is all the questions that we have for you today. Again, just want to say thank you so much to Ken for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. We will share all of your resources that you've shared with us on the fosteringsuccessmichigan.com website. If you have additional questions for Ken, please feel free to send them to Fostering Success Michigan. We will show our contact information at the end of this webinar, and we will get those questions onto Ken. I want to say thank you to all of our listeners for your questions. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your resources. As you all know, Fostering Success Michigan loves to hear about new resources and make sure that our young people with experience in foster care have access to the very essential resources that you all are able to provide. Just a heads up that next month is our health and mental health life domain. So April, we will focus on health and mental health. You can join us for the Fostering Success Michigan Life Domains webinar, which will feature Dave Zellmer from Ozone House on April 6th. We look forward to seeing hopefully lots of you at our FSM Community Collaborative focused on health and mental health that will be held on April 12th at Saginaw Valley State University, co-hosted by the FAST program. And you can look forward to hearing our Life Domains podcast, the physical and mental health domain, that will be live at the end of April. So thank you everybody for joining us for our webinar today and for joining us this month as we focused on housing. As always, this recording will be available on the Fostering Success Michigan website, and it will be linked in our wrap-up email featuring all of the housing resources that we have discussed throughout this month. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.